Last time, I responded to the response of the response. This time, I'll be doing it again. Except for the other parts that I didn't do last time.
So many questions. Pretty awesome. But first, a story.
Now, last time I skipped your analogy. This time I'll respond to it. It seems to me that you're under the impression that atheists didn't get what kind of Christianity that you're offering to them. And that may or may not be the case. The thing is, there's lots of different flavors out there, and they all claim to be the actual chocolate, including yours. Now, Catholicism, some of it, does tend to say that the church, meaning the Catholic Church, is the only right, ultimate right one, but it's okay if you don't go to the Catholic Church. But if you don't, it's not like you're not going to get saved, but you're not going to get, like, the full real chocolate, to use your analogy. And us skeptics are just like, yeah, that's nice. All these other denominations that are not Catholic, that are Protestant or whatever, they all pretty much say the same thing. They all think, almost all of them think that they've got it right. Now, there's some that will say, well, we've got some of it right, but maybe it's okay to go to this or that denomination or whatever. Some will say it doesn't really matter as long as you, do this or that. But try to get a coherent methodology of how to discover who has it right. Forget about it. It's not out there as far as I can determine. And no one's presented it either. Otherwise, we'd have a convergence upon a single agreement of the real chocolate, rather than the tons of flavors of chocolate that we have out there. In fact, it's even worse than that. They all claim to be chocolate, but they don't taste like chocolate to us. And we're not even necessarily tasting them because we want the test done to show that it is chocolate in the first place before we even try it, because we're wary of those that are claiming that it's chocolate because they're not showing us the ingredients. So, for all we know, we could be eating poison at them or something. This analogy is broken now. I've broken the analogy. It was kind of broken to begin with, to be honest with you. But, no, it's not that we don't know which one is the chocolate one or not chocolate one. It doesn't matter. Your views of what you think Christianity are immaterial, because remember, you labeled your video the top 5 atheist Bible misconceptions. Top 5? How did you know that? How did you come to that conclusion? How many atheists did you talk to compile this list? Now, I didn't complain about that last time because I don't really care. You might have based this on conversations that you sort of remember, or things that you saw on the internet, or I don't know what. But I'm granting you the benefit of the doubt to assume that you talked to at least a couple of atheists at some point in time, and you thought these were like the top biggest problems that atheists had with the Bible. And our response to you was to tell you, no, here's what in my case, my response was, here's my problems. And then the other atheist said their problems. Some other atheist said their problem. So I honestly think that you kind of missed the forest for the trees, that you didn't really understand what it was that we were trying to tell you. Here's our problems with the Bible. And perhaps your flavor of Christianity might have a way to deal with those problems, but we also need to know that your flavor of Christianity is the right one in the first place. And we don't know that.
Username says, awesome username, by the way, Christianity poisons the only tree that can bear its fruit. Christianity cannot be discovered like germs or quantum physics, unless you're talking about the natural. Teachings is the only source for Christianity. Teaching is handed directly down by Jesus Christ, I should add.
Well, to be fair, that's your belief. It's not something that's concretely known beyond any shadow of a doubt. Yes, you could go the historical route and say, well, at least Jesus probably existed. Maybe, yes, there's some people that debate that, not too many, but I don't know. The legendary status of the things that he did make it so that I have to question the rest of the story. I don't know how exaggerated this story became, and I don't know what words of his were or were not recorded accurately. And I just don't buy into the idea that God would preserve its word because the word's been changed so many times already. There's multiple different biblical translations, multiple different interpretations of those translations, and you can't really say, well, but God's preserving like the core word, because again, you have multiple different denominations, and you want to blame that on sin or what have you. It doesn't really resolve the point that we don't have a clear, coherent, one way of looking at this that we could say for sure this really came from this guy. I don't know that. I don't think you have a way to prove that historically, given the time scales that we're dealing with. And even if you had writing from exactly the time that Jesus supposedly said those words, there's no way to know that somebody didn't make that up. So it's still a problem because of the legendary claims. Now, if you had somebody saying, yeah, here's this guy who said this stuff, then I say, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, and the legendary stuff is discarded, but then the miraculous goes away, and then you just have some guy saying some stuff, big deal. So, at best, you have teachings that may or may not have been uttered by somebody and then exaggerated through time, and at worst, there's no way to even confirm that this actually was said by anybody ever, except for whoever wrote it or said that it was said at some point. That's not very good.
One of the key teachings is all mortal humans are born with sin. That's not accurate. It's original sin, which is differentiated from sin.
And these are things that are in your view. This is your view of the scripture. This is your interpretation. Now, it may not be you, might be your denomination, might be the Catholic Church, but it's still that particular group's idea of what this means. Perhaps this individual had a church that said original sin in a different way than how you are teaching it. That's very possible. So rather than addressing the concern of this, you say, oh, you're wrong completely, it's actually this, but your solution to the issue still isn't really a solution, because whatever you label sin as, or however it's supposed to work, it's still a defect in the system that was created by a perfect entity, which means the perfect entity built a system that wasn't perfect because reasons.
Which basically means we will do wrong and be wrong. That's not what that means. Original sin means that we are inclined to do the evil. We're attracted to the evil. It doesn't mean we will do it. It means we're attracted to it.
But why? Why have us supposedly built with the desire to go towards bad? Why not a desire to go towards good? Or why not a blank slate? This interferes with a free choice to make, because your nature is inclined to do something that you ought not to do according to the nature of God that created the system, that would then give you the nature that God doesn't want you to have, and then that would not lead you to God, because it's going to lead you away from God, because it's going to lead you to the bad stuff. But then you need God to save you from that, but you don't know that because you're so far away from God that you wouldn't know God at that point, so that doesn't really make sense, but okay, whatever.
So you're taking away human free will here.
Right, which is exactly what you're saying is happening already. I mean, maybe we have free will, but we have an inclination to do bad. So how does that enable us to have free will? At least pure free will. A blank slate, then you could make the argument that we have free will. But with an inclination towards good or bad, we no longer really have free will, because we have that desire to go one way or the other. It's like you have an inclination to always lean to the right. Well, you have the free will not to do that, but I just really want to lean to the right, and it's not my fault, it's just my nature. Oh well, so much for free will, I guess.
This means to believe Christianity, I must trust a source that Christianity deems completely untrustworthy. That's not accurate at all. Christianity does not teach that the intellect is incapable of reason, that we cannot reason that 2 plus 3 is 5 because we are born with original sin. That's completely false.
Well, it might be false for your version, but I can find, and I found, at least one Christian out there that said, don't trust reason, go completely with faith. That's just one counterexample. I'm sure if I dug deep enough, I could find more examples of other Christians that teach that you shouldn't have knowledge or you shouldn't trust your mind or whatever. And in fact, I've heard creationists say things like that you can't trust your mind if it's natural or from evolution, but you can if it's from God, so have faith.
Plus, again, the natural and the supernatural. Christianity believes that the supernatural aspects of our faith were given to us directly from God, Jesus Christ himself, and handed down in an unbroken line for 2,000 years, and that it's been protected. Now, if you want to debate that, you don't believe in the supernatural aspects of our faith. I mean, I'm not forcing you. Have a free will. I'm not shoving that down your throat.
Okay, Brad, I want to test your idea here. You said that we have the free will to believe or not in regards to the supernatural. Okay, I'm going to make a claim now, Brad. I have supernatural abilities. You have the free will to believe that or not believe it. Well, do you though? Do you really have the free will to just decide to believe that I have supernatural abilities? Or, and be honest, is it that it would take something, some demonstration, some proof to convince you that that statement was true? Because that's the logical route. I made a claim. I have the burden to support that claim. I claim that I have supernatural abilities. And even if I did something weird looking on camera, it could be some sort of trickery. It could be some optical illusion, and so you'd want something more than just a video of me making something appear and disappear, for example, because that's really easy to do with a cut. So it's not really that you have that sort of free will to believe instantly without any rhyme or reason to it and then just stop believing immediately without any rhyme or reason. Now, maybe over time you could talk yourself into believing that I have supernatural powers, or maybe you want to go the apologetic route and go, well, technically you do have supernatural powers because the Bible says whatever, and I was like, yeah, don't go down that road, Brad, because we want to have an honest conversation, I hope, with each other. And the problem is that the methodology that we're using is not the same methodology that you're using to come to your conclusions. The methodology, broadly speaking, of skeptic/atheist is to look at what can be looked at, explore what can be explored. And the things that are outside of that, we doubt. And this is, again, very broadly speaking. I can only really speak of myself and my own methodology. I require empirical evidence, which is something visual. Now, that doesn't have to be with the naked eye. It can be with a microscope or a telescope or some other device. If you don't have that, then maybe you have some sort of repeated test that can be performed so that we can make sure it's not a trick or an optical illusion. And if you don't have that, then hopefully you have a valid and sound argument. You have an argument that doesn't have any logical fallacies. And if you don't have that, then I don't know what you could possibly hope to have that would convince me. But if you think you have a fourth way of knowing something is true or real, then you'd have to present that and explain how that worked. And then I could utilize that system to then know if X, Y, or Z was true. But without that, if you didn't have those three, and you didn't have something else for me to consider, I'd have to be skeptical of your conclusions. So, me saying I'm supernatural you don't really have the free will choice to just believe that that's true. Because that's just not how our brains work, broadly speaking. Again, maybe there's somebody that's on the opposite end of the bell curve that can just go, bing, I believe this, bing, I don't believe this. But can you really, honestly, Brad, just believe that I have supernatural powers? I don't think so.
But argue what we're arguing. Don't misrepresent what we're teaching for the sake of making a point. All you've done is create a straw man.
Remember, though, Brad, you named your video, Why Do Atheists Reject the Bible? Now, the subheading is Top 5 Atheist Biblical Misconceptions, but that's not what's going to probably stick out in people's head. They're going to see the title of the video, and they're going to respond to that title. Besides the fact that the top 5 Bible misconceptions really doesn't apply to us atheists. We know the Bible, broadly speaking, and polls have shown that typically atheists know more about the Bible than Christians do. I don't know how much that stands true in comparison to Catholics, or if that was part of the polls or whatever. I don't know, and if it's been done lately or not. But nonetheless, these aren't Bible misconceptions of atheists. These are Bible misconceptions of anyone that doesn't agree with your interpretation of the Bible and your theology, at best. So the whole video could be seen as a straw man. Even if you've polled atheists and said, okay, I'm going to write down their things that they are getting wrong about the Bible, it would still be from your theological viewpoint, which you have not yet demonstrated is the right one. And you can pretend that you have the right one all you want, but until you demonstrate demonstrably that you've got the right one, these are misconceptions that anyone could have, not just atheists. But the responses to that video were about what we reject about the Bible. That's what we were telling you, and I thought that was pretty clear when I read the comments. I was like, hey, we're all telling you, no. This is why we reject the Bible, not your reasons, which, I don't know, might not even pay attention to. Who cares about your ideas? This is what our ideas really are. Why didn't you ask us?
Bill Gartwright, I hope I'm saying that right. Hey, Bill, I loved your comment, by the way. I don't reject the Bible. I accept that the Bible exists. Many different Bibles, in fact, with different translations. So this is an argument that pops up quite a bit. It's as if, so in any field, for example, in science, in any of the sciences, there's academic research that is done in those fields, and there are peer-reviewed research papers that are presented. It's the same thing in biblical scholarship.
Yes, the anonymous biblical scholars that seem to come into these conversations. Who are they? Could you give me a list of who they are? Like, what qualifies you to be a biblical scholar, by the way? Like, who counts and who doesn't? Do you have to have certain degrees? How many papers do you need to publish? Are these papers peer-reviewed or not? In the first place, what system do they use? And what agreement, if any, do they agree upon that this or that way is the right way to teach this or that? And if that agreement is so uniform, then why haven't they collectively published a single Bible that says, this is from all of us, this is the way that you should read it, this is the way that we understand it, that we've agreed upon? Is that even a thing? So I say to this assertion of this anonymous authority that's supposedly out there, to prove it. Show me the names of these people, show me what degrees they have, show me what system they use, and show me, most importantly, the agreement that we would expect to see. Not the disagreement that we actually see, which is what the guy is actually complaining about. He's saying there's multiple different versions of the Bible. It doesn't matter what the scholarly view is. We don't know who the bleep those scholars are, nor it seems that the general public doesn't either, because we have all these different versions of the Bible. Why wouldn't they just publish a definite edition of the Bible if what you're saying is correct in any shape or form at all. Unless maybe they don't have a clear consensus and agreement on even, say, one issue, let alone multiple ones.
Every single translation or mistranslation or version, it's all well documented, and there are tons of professional biblical scholars that write and argue with each other. Every bit of this is known. You're not going to point out some version that contradicts another version. We are aware of every bit of this. The Bibles I have back here on the shelf, when you go through, wherever there's a question about a version or whether a verse should be included, there's asterisks and footnotes, and it tells you that that particular verse is translated differently in a different version, or this particular verse is not included in an ancient manuscript. All of that stuff's known.
I could easily find Bibles that don't have any asterisks at all, any commentary whatsoever. Many Bibles lack that. So, no to that idea. And again, it doesn't really matter, even if you had all the Bibles saying, well, this is... there's still not a coherent agreement. Why not just do one version of the Bible and have it all there? It's not done. Nobody's done it because nobody can agree on these things. That's why so many different versions exist. It's because different people have different theology. How are you going to possibly hope to convince the King James Onlyist people that their version is like the worst one historically speaking? You can't. I know. I've tried. I've used logic. I've used science. I've used theology. There's just no way to penetrate that belief. Well, because it's a belief, it's a teaching, it's central to their doctrine. They can't give it up, because if they give it up, that means something is wrong, and maybe there's not a God. Well, maybe it's just that the God that you believe in isn't quite the correct version of God. That is to say, you're worshiping the Bible instead of worshiping the actual God. You're worshiping the idea that this is the single right way of things. At least the King James Onlyists all use the King James Bible. But even then, among King James Onlyists, there's a wide variety of different flavors that you can find in those churches too. So good luck finding a coherentness in the system itself. It doesn't matter if you, quote unquote, whoever you is, maybe you know this, maybe some high up people know this, but the general public doesn't really know that. And again, Christians don't even necessarily know what the Bible says in general, let alone what the footnote says. The thing is, again, not to point to the fact, but I gotta, atheists tend to know more about the Bible than Christians do. Now, I've forgotten probably more of the Bible than a Christian might know, and I don't care to relearn it, but that's just me. Other atheists do know this stuff pretty darn well and could go head-to-head with you on those sort of biblical scholarship-y sort of debates if you want to do that. But again, we would need at least one biblical scholar, whoever that might be. Or in this case, we would need the proof that all the biblical scholars know that this is a problem. And they don't care because all these versions of the Bible still exist. But they have footnotes. I don't care. That doesn't change the fact that somebody might not read that footnote, even if all the Bibles had footnotes, which they don't. So this isn't a solution at all to the answer to the problem of the question and the people living in the Bible. What the bleep?
We're not reading this stuff blindly and stupidly. We're aware of where this stuff is coming from and where it's deficient and where there's questions about its origin. But Bill goes on. Like I said, he said, I don't reject the Bible. I accept that the Bible exists. I accept that the Harry Potter books exist too. And I accept that the Spider-Man comics exist. Just because something is written in a book that doesn't mean it's true. Now, you hit the nail on the head. This is exactly what I would encourage any atheist to do. Take the literature as it's intended. Take it as it's written. There is a supernatural aspect of this, and I know it's a huge chasm for me to say, okay, believe all of this supernatural stuff, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking you to look at it from the author's perspective. What are they trying to communicate? The beauty of the story. Look at the beauty. That's what's being missed in this whole thing, is the beauty of the story.
Oh, this is impossible to resist. I mean, I could just read Psalm 137:9, but he could mess with that theologically and say, well, it's about this, it's about that, or whatever. No. It's way easier. Let's go with the beauty of the story of, say, the flood. Now, I don't care if it's one person that you killed, let alone however many were supposedly wiped out by this thing. You killed one person. Why? Because they were bad. How about you redeem them? They're irredeemable. Aren't you God? Can't you do anything? Well, free will, blah, blah. But you gave them that free will. How about you forgive them and give them a clean slate? Or put them somewhere where they can't hurt anybody, but let them live on their own. Just give them a separate world or universe, for that matter. Why kill them in such a terrible way on top of everything? Just, if you're gonna kill them, just like wink them out of existence at least, or something. Why drown them? That's really messed up. But I guess there's a beauty to it. Yes, there's ways to analyze and critically analyze that story to extract beauty from it. Rather than looking at the hurting of the people, you could say, well, it's metaphorical. Nobody was actually killed. This is a baptism of the world, and isn't that nice? And it cleanses and rejuvenates the earth. And the whole drowning part, that was put in later because people were trying to make sense of what was going on, or whatever. Yeah, sure. You could do that with any negative sort of story. You can make it positive by enough spin. Beauty is also subject to the eye of the beholder. You might look at some of these stories as beautiful, and other people might look at them as rotten to the core. It's pretty darn subjective, but we don't care. Even if the Bible had nothing but wonderful, lovely, beautiful stories, that still doesn't make it true or not true, which is all we care about. As far as reading it from the genre that it's in, well, okay, it's in mythology, so that's how I read it, as mythology, along with all the other mythology books out there. So I still don't believe it's anything more than mythology. What do you have to offer that might convince me that it isn't just mythology? Well, look at that. I hit 30 minutes. It's got to be a part 3, I guess. There's got to be a part 3. Didn't you say there was going to be a part 3 for that other video? Yeah, I did say that, but don't just ignore that, because this is going to actually have a part 3. What if you don't do a part 3 on it? No. I'll totally do a part 3 on this video. You'll do another video in between. I might do a video in between. You don't know that. Who the heck are you anyways? I'm the director. That's calling you. You're my director? How am I affording you? Nobody gives me any money for these videos. What's happening? Why are we fading out?